Well, we finally saw Last Voyage of the Demeter. Always timely on this channel, keeping up with the new things. But finally saw Last Voyage of the Demeter, and that was certainly a movie. Um, what I did like about it, I guess, I would say I like that they went back to like a Nosferatu version of Dracula. It's nice to see Dracula as a monster rather than a romantic hero. Um, and yeah, that was that was good. The rest, man, it was dressed up really well, but it really was just like, here's a survival horror on the ship. And they dressed it up. Dracula has a great sense of the theatrical, like, mwah. There's all this stuff that Dracula is doing simply for the benefit of the audience. Like, this is gonna look so cool when I make this thing happen, make that thing happen. It seems to be primarily Dracula's motivation. um and and then they would intersperse this these generally good scenes. I mean, okay, the Dracula's theatricalness certainly has its benefits in crafting some really cool scenes. Except that eventually it just gets so much that it's just like, I was actually laughing at the end. By the end, I was laughing at just like, here's Dracula being theatrical again. Oh, Dracula, you wacky guy. Um, that yeah, it started to get like comically theatrical towards the end. Um, and it would be interspersed with these characters doing these soliloquies that just come out of nowhere. That any one of them could have been a theme that they actually developed through the movie, and that could have reached its climax in the final battle of Dracula. But instead, he just like starts going off about like, oh, want us to think you're a god, but really you're not. And it's like, where did that come from? What part of this movie would make you think that that was Dracula's motivation? Because that he never said anything like that. None of those topics had ever come up. It's just out of the blue, something Dracula. Oh, you want us to think you're a god? Like, what? Where, where did that come from? Or when he talks about, the main character talks about his race and the challenges of being the first black man to get a degree from Cambridge. And it's like, okay, why are you telling us this story? I mean, other than it's Hollywood with a conspicuously diverse cast of characters on a ship in 1897. Um, but it's just like, okay, so he ties it into, okay, so his experience of racism makes him want to make sense of why the world is the way it is, why he, as a perfectly qualified human being, can't get a position because of his race. But it doesn't come together quite the way I think they were hoping it would. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and you're just like, okay, and um, she, the girl does a soliloquy, the protagonist does a couple soliloquies, the captain does a soliloquy, and it all just comes out of nowhere. And any one of them could have been a theme that they actually developed through, and climaxing with the battle with Dracula. And that was the next biggest disappointment, is that they lacked the courage to go where the story went. Um, Insofar as we know what's supposed to happen on the Demeter, everyone's supposed to die, right? That's the story. But they cheaped out at the end, and they had spoilers. They had the guy survive. It's like, okay, so there's one survivor of the Demeter now, and he's dedicated to hunting down Dracula, who's being all theatrical again and playing cat and mouse with him. And it's like, but how does his story resolve then? Because we know what happens the rest of the story is where Harker and Van Helsing and Mina and all that stuff, and they end up going back to Dracula's castle, and the three guys, Arthur and Quincy and Jack and Harker and Mina and Van Helsing, are all there, and they all kill Dracula. So where does this leave this guy now? He's dedicated to hunting down this evil for some reason, because suddenly he resolved his question about the evil in the world, which I'm not exactly sure what the question he resolved was. Um, and but now we know he's not going to, because that's the story of Van Helsing and Harker and all them. So where does that leave this guy now that he's the sole survivor of the Demeter? Like it's just they wanted to give it like this slightly happy ending, I guess, of this guy surviving, but if you know the story, it can't be resolved at all. So what was the point of that? You might as well. He would have been better off having died like some heroic but futile death, and that be his resolution to his questions about the nature of good and evil and whatever. Which again is also like, what did he learn about evil and good and evil and stuff like that? Like he could have learned something like good is evil is in the world. Evil is this thing that suddenly happens, right? You suddenly get a vampire on your ship. What do you do, right? And good is the choices you make to fight that and to try and make the world a better place. In this case, by trying to get rid of Dracula. And even if you don't succeed, having a faith that other people will take up that struggle, right? Which would have fit with the story of Dracula and would have been a good climax for that character. But instead, they cheaped out and just had him survive. I was like, okay, great. And what did he learn about evil? Well, I don't know, because the movie didn't say anything about the nature of good and evil. It didn't examine Dracula as something evil. It didn't touch on that at all. As it goes back to that whole like you want us to think you're a god. Like, where did you get that from? What happened in this movie that would lead you to believe that? Um, there's no examination about the nature of good and evil or why Dracula is evil. What is the nature of Dracula's evil? What does it say about the nature of evil? Any of that sort of stuff. None of that is in there. Dracula is just a monster with a sense of the theatrical. Um, and nothing is developed about that. And somehow this experience resolves this guy's questions about the nature of good and evil. So he's dedicated to hunting down evil, but he's not going to succeed because we know who succeeds because we've all read the book and watched other movies and stuff. So it's just a survival horror with a sense of theatrical. Um, yes, I did catch. Oh, there's the Wolfman's cane in there. Great. Okay, that's cool. Good. Okay. But otherwise, it's just like, yeah, I guess it was. I wouldn't even. Again, I was laughing by the end. I wouldn't even consider it a consummate horror movie. Just because it was getting comical towards the end, that it always had to be something theatrical with Dracula. What a drama queen. So yeah, it is a movie and it exists, and that is my opinion of it. So there you go. It's only been like how months and months since this thing came out, but there we go. That's my opinion.